and welcome to episode number 73 of the Introvert Biz Growth Podcast, the show where I talk to introverts who grow their business and make a difference. As always, I'm Sarah Zenecroce, I'm your host, and I'm so happy that you're here again today for another episode. How are you doing? Over here in Switzerland, it feels like spring is coming early, and I hear the birds chirping outside, which is great. I don't know if you can hear them, probably not, because I have a really good mic that blocks out the surrounding sound. So if it wasn't for my sinus infection, I'd be really doing the happy dance. I love spring. I have another great interview for you today. I'm talking to Steve Woodruff, who reached out to me about his new book called Clarity Wins, Be Heard, Be Referred. Luckily for him, he's also an introvert, so I said, yes, of course, I have you on my show. So Steve Woodruff is known as the King of Clarity. In a world full of noise and distractions, Steve helps businesses craft a message so clear that they can be heard, remembered, and referred. In over 30 years of business experience, he has consulted with companies ranging from solo startups to top 5 pharma. You can learn more about him and his work at clarityfuel.com. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Steve. Steve, so good to talk to you. Hi.
Sarah, it's great to be able to get together, at least virtually.
Yes, exactly. And I think we should have started recording 10 minutes ago because we had this great conversation about introverts and anxiety-free marketing and all of that, but we'll get back into that, right? So let's start with the beginning. And I just read your official bio, but I want you to tell my audience the real story, the non-official story. So who is Steve? And, tell us about your business and how you built this business being an introverted entrepreneur and how that felt.
Well, the real story is starting out my career feeling like a misfit. So I began my professional career in sales because I really needed to make some significant revenue. It was a pivot from another pursuit that I had had for a few years that didn't work out. And I'm not a classic salesperson. I am not a gabber. I am not somebody that's real outgoing. But I did pretty well because it was a technical sale. And so a lot of thinking had to go into it, a lot of analysis. And turns out that's the kind of work I can do. I am not one of those door-to-door salespeople types. So I did that for about 10 years in medical devices. And I did some marketing as well because it was a very small company. So you wear a lot of hats, and kind of liked the marketing part. And then I went on to a software company, a small vendor company servicing the pharmaceutical industry. And there I again wore multiple hats, selling, marketing, branding. And once again, it was a fairly technical sale. So I did okay with it, even though I continued to feel like I was a fish out of water. And partway in, I hired this natural salesperson. And Sarah, this woman had the magic. She could warm people up in milliseconds. And I would just watch in awe as she interacted with people. And I finally came to the conclusion, you know what? I'm not a salesperson. Not really. And I'm more of a problem solver. I'm more of an analyst. I'm actually more of a consultant. And I really happen to love marketing and branding. So all that time I'd been living this sort of dual life, this cognitive dissonance of being involved in selling and trying to project myself out. And it wasn't real natural. And over time, I began to embrace who I was. It was hard because I always felt defective. I felt like I should be more outgoing. I should be more aggressive. I should feel comfortable in crowds. And I tried to make myself feel that way, but I couldn't. So slowly I began to just accept who I was. And it was many years of struggle. And then when I started my own company 12 years ago as a solopreneur, I decided that I was going to build my company on me. I was going to make a job, a career, a company, a service that was completely centered on who I was. And so that's what I've done as a consultant for 12 years. I have been building a business which involves creating networks, making referrals, and now writing a book that has been a reflection of who I am. And it's been very liberating to do that. It's been a bit of a struggle because most people are expected to conform to some other norms or some other, identity in a company. But there's something delightful about saying, here are my strengths, here's my capabilities, here's what I'm all about. I'm going to do that.
Yeah. I congratulate you for doing that and even, doing that 12 years ago, because now, ever since Susan Cain's book came out, Quiet, there's been more and more talk about introversion and, that it's acceptable and all of that. But 12 years ago, it must have been, really tough to come out and say, hey, you know what, I'm doing it my way. I might not fit into all your other templates and molds, but this is how I do it, and it still works in business, right?
Well, Susan's book was a real help for me because, in a sense, when she gave that TED Talk and wrote that book and had been writing blog posts, the effect it had on me, and I know on many others, is it finally gave me permission to be an introvert.
Right.
And I think I'd been yearning for that. I'd been fighting internally, who was I? Who should I be? And Susan's approach had this salutary effect of allowing me to finally surrender and say, okay, this is who I am. And I know one of the things you like to ask your guests as far as a golden nugget is a book perhaps that's had a lot of influence. And before Quiet and before Susan, I think the book that had the most impact on me was Now Discover Your Strengths, because it was bringing to the fore this idea that we really need to walk in and work in our strengths, not just try to carve away our weaknesses. I found that book to be an absolute revelation. Really helped me along the way of being able to assess who I am, what I should do, and own it. And that has shaped all my work, has shaped everything I've done since then, and has dramatically shaped the book that I recently released, Clarity Wins, because a big part of that book is you've got to walk in your strengths, you've got to identify your superpower, you've got to find your sweet spot. And I tie all of that back to that book, which helped me to start to get in touch with who I really was.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. And in this program that I'm launching that we talked about before we started recording, Anxiety-Free Marketing, it brings us all back to who we are, because a lot of times, or the kind of the traditional marketing model, the 7 P's of marketing, nobody ever talks about who am I as the business owner? What are my superpowers? What are my values? What are my strong moral principles? Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad to hear you say that is such an essential part of our work and of our marketing as well. Because as you mentioned to me before, naturally I will be attracting introverts because I use introverted language in my communication, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if I hadn't done that work on myself, well, then I would probably not know that. And so tell us more about this book that you wrote, Clarity Wins. Is that mainly gaining clarity in doing your inner work, or does that clarity also apply to marketing message, all of the outer work?
It has 2 levels. There are principles of clarity that apply to everything. The way we look at ourselves, the inner work, the strategic way in which we approach the market, the messaging. So I lay out in the book the core principles of clarity that we're up against a tremendous amount of noise and distraction and confusion in the world. And unless we're really clear on our identity, unless we're really clear on our focus, and then clear on our message, it's going to be very hard to stand out in the world. So, for instance, Sarah, if you put out a shingle on a website and said, I'm a marketer, well, that's true, but if somebody wanted to send you a referral, it would be this mixed bag of who knows what. It may have absolutely nothing to do with your sweet spot. Right. And so we all have to define our sweet spot. And I shamelessly borrow the 5 crucial questions from journalism, which is the what, what exactly do we do, for whom, what's our ideal client, the persona, the person that most benefits from what we can offer, the how, which is what is our magic, what's our superpower, what's our differentiating ability, the why, which is what's the business pain or professional hope that's going to drive somebody to open their wallet. We can't just list off a bunch of abstract features and benefits. We have to get in touch with the emotional aspect of what people are feeling and thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, the where. And the where may be a vertical market, it may be a regional area, it may be virtual and global, but there are 7.5 billion people on this planet. Obviously, everybody is not your client and everybody is not mine. So one of the principles of the book is that we need to define and embrace our pigeonhole. We have a pigeonhole where we fit. We need to find the right words to describe it, and then be able to tell other people, this is exactly who I am, what I do, and make it so clear that they can refer us to others. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why the subtitle of the book is Get Heard, Get Referred. Clarity is wonderful all by itself. It's got its own value. But from a business perspective, one of the outcomes of clarity is to become a referral-based business instead of wasting our time in random acts of marketing.
Right. Yeah, this so much ties in with my beliefs and, what you need to do in terms of marketing in order to stand out and yes, get this clarity, first of all, for yourself. Who do you want to work with? Who would like what you're offering? And then indeed, that will then bring you the right kind of referrals. First of all, it will bring you to the ideal clients, and ideal clients refer you to other ideal clients.
Right.
The problem usually with the referrals is if you start working with not so ideal clients, you then get more and more of those not so ideal clients. Because
that's correct. And one of the
friends.
things I've found, Sarah, and I bet you've noticed this too, is that when a business actually polls their customers, talks to their customers, and asks even their customers to say, what do I do? What's my main thing? What's my strongest suit? And a lot of times, even our customers don't know. We haven't equipped them with simple, clear words to say, here's my pigeonhole, here's my sweet spot, and here are the people I'm looking for. So we're missing this opportunity to activate a referral sales force, even among our customers, if we don't have clear words to speak to them.
Yeah, exactly. So let's come back to you as the guy behind Clarity Fuel. What are your introverted superpowers?
I'd say in many ways, the biggest one is analysis. I have a mind that doesn't stop and constantly sifting through lots of ideas to try to find the key idea, to try to find what's missing, to try to distill down to something simpler. And I do view this as, I call it sometimes just magic. It's not even something I can conjure up. It's not something I can teach anybody to do. It's just there. It's in my DNA. And for quite some time, I felt that this was not as valuable as what extroverts can do, go out and schmooze. But it turns out that I can dive deep with people in a short period of time, in an hour or two, and help them figure things out, almost as an unofficial therapist. And it's as easy as breathing to me. I don't know why. I know what kind of questions to ask. I know how to draw conclusions and tie things together and listen carefully. And so that is a very major part of what I do in my business, is a lot of questioning and a lot of analysis. And then through that, bringing to the fore the brand and the message and that kind of thing. As you know, superpowers can have a good side and a dark side. So that endless analysis was accompanied for decades with undiagnosed and untreated depression from my teen years into my 40s. And so there was an unhealthy aspect to that level of inwardness that was not helpful, that was really difficult to deal with. over the past 10 or 12 years of actually closer to 15 years now of taking antidepressants that has lifted that cloud of darkness over that inwardness and actually enabled it to be more of a superpower and less of a curse. For a while, it was certainly a both and situation, and now it's mostly a very positive thing.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I'm glad you're doing better. So interesting because I heard on another podcast, can't remember which one, for introverts, they were analyzing whether extroverts are happier than introverts. And so this overthinking and analyzing and all of that, it was one of the big reasons for more depression with introverts compared to extroverts, right?
Definitely.
And so you just confirmed that. I haven't had a guest on this show before who just admitted to it and said that in so many words, but it's true. We are dealing with more of this constant thinking and never being able to turn it off, and it can get unhealthy, like you said.
Yeah, it can be destructive. I, like many people who have gone through the things I've gone through, had just tremendous difficulty with insecurities and with feeling like an imposter and negativity and all that. Because I wasn't even aware that I was biochemically messed up, I just learned to manage it. I didn't even actually know what was going on. I just learned coping strategies. And I look back, Sarah, and I sometimes with scratching my head and saying, what could have been during those 20s, 30s, and 40s if I had been at full power? Because I probably was running at like 50% of my capacity, just with this constant, never-ending internal battle. But it turns out that being able now to understand it and relate to others and to be able to speak to others who are going through it is a tremendous blessing to them and helpful to me to realize that it wasn't in vain. This is a condition that lots of people have. It's not a matter in many cases of somebody's fault. It's biochemistry. I tried everything I could to overcome it in my own strength because I'm a guy and that's what you're supposed to do. Well, that didn't work out so well.
Or it took too long to finally say, okay, I'm surrendering and I'm just getting help.
Yeah, I had to hit a wall. I really did. I emotionally and psychologically hit a wall in my mid-40s and finally went to a doctor. He very amusingly, I was describing it and I said to him, I'm prepared to start to think maybe there's something, biological about this. And he looked at me with a sort of ironic grin and he said, well, your brain is an organ, isn't it? You couldn't think your way out of a broken leg. I'm going, oh, okay. Yeah, you got a point there.
Yeah. Wow. Let's go back to your business and how you help your clients. So you're doing consulting. What my audience is always interested in is how do you make money? Do you have big mandates? Do you work one-on-one? Tell us all about it.
So I have multiple income streams. I still work with my pharmaceutical clients, and I have a matchmaking referral business there where I help my large pharma commercial training clients find the right outsource vendors, because there's this universe of dozens and dozens of consultants and training companies and agencies that are outsource partners to pharma. But a lot of them all sound the same. They don't distinguish themselves well. They don't differentiate or brand. And so I came in when I started my company 12 years ago. I said, I can fix this problem of helping these companies brand themselves and differentiate and then help my pharma clients pick the right ones. So I launched my consultancy as basically the eHarmony of pharma training, matchmaker. And it's been great. I've been doing it ever since. But I also do workshops for some of my pharma clients, clarity and on project management and vendor management. And that's a good source of revenue. And then I started doing these half-day and full-day clarity sessions with the companies to get their brand straightened out. And for some of them, they'd been in business for 10 or 15 or 20 years. They'd never had a clear message. And I'd spend a few hours together with them and the magic would happen. And all of a sudden we'd have them figured out and then I'd know how to refer them. And that was the goal, is to make referrals. So the clarity business grew out of this matchmaking business. And then I started doing clarity for lots of different types of companies, for individuals in career transition. So on the one hand, I work with these very large multinational pharma companies. And then on the other hand, I do a lot of work in these deep dive sessions with solopreneurs, startups, consultants, small businesses, because they're the ones that are most open to the message of major change based on a clear understanding of identity and a focus and a message. They're the Davids in a large marketplace of Goliaths who need to find how to stand out. And
Right.
that's my goal, is to help them stand out.
I love that diversity from, the small solopreneur to the big giant pharma companies. That's what keeps us so curious, right? As introverts, one of our superpowers is curiosity, and
Yes.
going from these different types of businesses, I think that's what keeps us engaged and curious. Yeah.
It's one of the things I love most. I tell people all the time, one of my favorite things is to dive into some new business. And what you find is there's this certain framework and set of principles of business is business. And so it's not that hard after you've been in business for a while and been around the block a few times to understand things like what's a good supply chain and what's good marketing and positioning and all this stuff. Doesn't matter what the industry is.
Yeah.
But then I find getting a chance to get my hands on all these different industries and niches, I love it. I find it to be so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that curiosity and that desire to learn more. And I've told my kids many times as we drive back and forth, I said, everything you see around you, take a look at it. Somebody thought about it, somebody made it, somebody sold it, somebody refined it. See, the business is everywhere, and the opportunity is endless. And I love diving into it.
I like that. So you're kind of raising your kids as future entrepreneurs.
One of them already is.
They already are. Yes, I was just going to say.
My oldest is already a consultant and marketer. He's actually one of the best known consultants online and Instagram in the whiskey industry. He's
wonderful. Okay.
Whiskey Nate. I discuss it in the book. He has a site called Whiskey with a View, combining love of the outdoors, photography, and whiskey. And he's gained over the years over 70,000 followers. He's gotten consulting gigs and paid to do marketing. And so the kids, at least to some degree, have been forced to catch the bug.
Wonderful. I love that. Yeah, he found the niche that fit with his personal passion. And that's the best way to run a business, right?
It is.
Wonderful. Great. So you already mentioned one of the 3 golden nuggets, the book. So you mentioned Now Find Your Strengths. Do you remember the author? I can't think of it. Okay.
Marcus Buckingham. I think it was Buckingham and Clifton, or it was people that were at that point live in the Gallup organization. I think Buckingham was one of those co-authors. Great.
I'll look it up and make sure to link to it. What about a personal habit, something that you do on a regular basis that contributes to your success?
As I've thought about that, and I've looked at all my different roles, it comes down to just a pattern of dogged determination. The reason I've succeeded in anything, even if it was not a great fit, even if there was a cognitive dissonance, even if it was, just having to get it done, is that I just don't give up. As you know, that can be a problem. You can be overly stubborn.
Yes.
And it's one reason why I lived with depression for years and wouldn't give up. But I think if you're an introvert and you're not going to have some of the natural can navigate through life and make everybody love me and like me type stuff, one of the ways that you can pretty much win is just by sticking to it. And I find that not so hard to do. I can work on my own. I can be my own boss. I can discipline my time. But you have to know yourself. I know people who've gone off on their own and who simply have not been able to thrive without the reinforcement of other people, without a team environment, without a larger structure. And it's torture for them to be on their own. Mm-hmm. For me, it's wonderful. I'll push my way through any wall, or maybe bloodied and unconscious finally give up. But I think diligence and perseverance is going to win whether or not you have the most amount of talent. People give up. And if we don't give up, we're going to win.
Right. I think you're right. And most guests so far have said that this kind of perseverance it seems to be an introverted strength. I think so. And also, of course, the fact, yes, we can work hours and hours by ourselves. That helps.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, you could work hours and hours by yourself, but then still give up. So it needs to be both, of course. Yes.
And I think it's helpful for anybody, whether introvert or extrovert, to be sure to get some smart people around you to give you feedback. So it took me a while to finally surrender to the fact that I needed a business coach. But I did eventually say, okay, I really need somebody to not merely hold me accountable to a to-do list, but to really understand me and to help me manage my flights of fancy, my ideals, my, wanting to go off on the next new thing because it was a fresh idea. And that's, I think, a real key for introverts is if you can find a small group or even one person that can serve as an encourager and a refiner of ideas and a coach, keep you on the right track, that's really important. And I have found that it's been way more important than I actually thought it was in my case.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think there's too many introverts still who think, oh, but I'm an introvert, I'm fine, I'm working by myself, that's how I want it. And then they get lonely, and we're still people. We still need connection. And yes, it's nice to have a coach because he or she pushes you further. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because we get lonely if we're doing everything by ourselves, and we can be a bit, hard-headed and think, oh, but I'm fine by myself. No, you're not. You need people, and not just people, but hire a coach. Glad you said
there's a piece of artwork behind my desk that I've referred to probably 6 million times in the last few years that says, you can't read the label of the jar you're in. And that one phrase has really stuck with me, because from a branding perspective, most individuals and companies are lost in their own forest and trees and need an outside voice to help them gain clarity. Yeah. But also from a personal, professional perspective, by definition, we can't be objective. We are subjective, and we can't read the label of our own jar. So it's much easier for me to help other people figure their stuff out, but I get myself wrapped around the axle all the time. And that's why I need people to help me think straight, because I can't read the label of my jar.
Exactly. Wonderful. I love that quote. We'll make sure to mention it in the show notes too. What about a tool, some internet resource that you'd like to refer to?
When I look at everything I've done, and I've been very active in social media for 12 years, blogging, Twitter, Facebook, all kinds of different things, Instagram. What has kept coming back for me, because my work is much more professional oriented, has been LinkedIn. LinkedIn's where I started. LinkedIn was the first platform I worked with. I got on there early, and it has been the most valuable platform for me in reaching my clientele, because that's where my clientele tends to be, and your clientele may differ. But with pharma people and marketers and all that, LinkedIn's kind of the meeting place. And it has gotten better and better. And one of the things I've been shocked to find with LinkedIn in the past 6 months, as I've experimented with it, is that's where I've gotten the most traction on videos that I've created. So I make these short videos. Like most introverts, I don't like being in front of a camera, but a 2 to 3 minute video seems to fit me very nicely. So I make these little videos called Clarity Over Coffee, and I'll put them on Facebook, I'll put them on YouTube, I'll put them wherever, but I've gotten the most traction on LinkedIn, which has been delightful. So LinkedIn continues to improve, and it continues to be the main way in which I interact with people online. Of course, platforms like Zoom and Skype and these others where you can make these calls, these are fabulous. But I just learned this, and I think it may have been one of your posts, this function of sending a little voice snippet on LinkedIn through the mobile phone. Was that you?
Yeah, might have been. I did share.
I think it was. You wrote that little post, and I said, well, that's interesting. So I just sent my first one this morning to somebody, and I see he just sent me one back.
Oh,
so
wonderful.
There may be a whole new way I'm going to be using LinkedIn now in the next few weeks, thanks to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's wonderful. Those audio messages, they make it just so much more personable, right? So
Right. And I don't like voicemail. I don't like calling phones and getting voicemail. It's awful. But the idea of sending a little snippet through LinkedIn, that's kind of appealing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm always asked, why did you specialize on LinkedIn? Why that platform? It's kind of the most boring platform out there. And I just realized a couple of years ago that it is because I'm introverted that I like LinkedIn so much. And I think it's the best platform for introverts. Obviously, yes, your ideal client needs to be on LinkedIn. So if you're in the jewelry business, then LinkedIn is not a great fit for you. But yeah, it just seems to be a platform where we don't have to share what we had for dinner last night and where we went on vacation. And we can be quite discreet and reserved and still be active on the platform and still be personable. I'm not saying we're only talking business, but it's just a different way of communicating on that platform. Yes.
Well, one of the other things I've discovered about myself, and I've shared this with clients and they'll laugh at me at times, but being an introvert, I prefer asynchronous communication. I like to think about what I'm going to say. I prefer to write it. And I really like talking to people on the phone. I don't mind texting, but it has to be planned.
Right.
So if I get an incoming phone call, I get really angry. It's terrible. It could even be from a family member. But I've realized that I have this mentality where I'm in a groove, I'm doing a certain thing, and it's an interruption. I hate interruptions, and I hate the fact that somebody's trying to require me to respond right away.
Right.
And so incoming texts that I'm not expecting, incoming phone calls that I'm not expecting really get my introvert hackles up. And I much prefer to have a scheduled phone call. Then I'm happy to talk. I'll talk to you for 45 minutes. I was scheduled for no problem at all. Or, some kind of exchange. So LinkedIn is great that way as well. There's no expectation that you're going to just suddenly be snarled into a 45-minute bunch of trivia with somebody.
That's so true. And I totally agree. All my phone calls are scheduled. I don't like just getting random numbers that you don't recognize. And then you're like, is this a client? Who is that? I didn't plan on it.
The dirty little secret for me is I don't even like getting calls from numbers I do recognize.
You're like busy. Okay. Wonderful. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time. I always end with a mindful ending, if you will. What are you grateful for today or this week, this year, Steve?
What I'm most grateful for right now, having been through the agony of writing a book this year and putting down everything I've been blogging about for 12 years and systematizing it, is I'm looking at 2019 and I'm looking almost like I feel like I'm starting all over again, like a really fresh start. I'm 60 years old. This is when people normally think they're retiring. Sarah, I feel like I'm just getting started. And I see that there are going to be potential avenues and whole new avenues of opportunity to help other people. And to end this year not thinking, oh man, glad that was over with, or just count the days until I can retire. I'm really grateful to be looking forward and saying, man, who knows? This could be a pretty amazing period in my life, and I think it will be with. Particularly now, I have 5 boys, 5 young men. One of them is in his junior year in high school. He's the youngest. All the others are out. One of them just got engaged. And so we're entering this phase of life where we more and more are taking our hands off of our kids, and that whole cycle of intensive parenting is starting to wind down, and that increasingly leads me to the question: okay, now what? And I'm excited by the now what.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. That's a great way to end this podcast, but begin your new life.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. It has been an absolute pleasure, Steve.
Sarah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks for the delightful chat.
Thank you. There you go. That's it for this episode of the Introvert Biz Growth podcast. You can find out more about Steve and his work at clarityfuel.com or get his book. That's what I'll do on Amazon or anywhere else where you can find books. It's called Clarity Wins, Be Heard, Be Referred. And you'll find this episode's show notes at sarahsanacroce.com/episode 73. If you are listening to the show on a mobile device, you can click on the description and you'll actually find all the clickable links there. In last week's Muse, I talked about my LinkedIn social serving program. So if you'd like to find out more about my group program, which starts on March 7th, please go to sarahsanacroce.com/social serving. This is Sarah Sanacroce signing off from the Introvert Biz Growth podcast. Remember, you need to use your unique introverted superpowers in order to make a difference. Have a great week.